What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here. Welcome into the Thomas Mott Show. The first ever interview on this show. I figured we'll do an interview with the enemy, my good buddy RJ Ochoa, managing editor and editor-in-chief of bloggingtheboys.com. As you see behind him, he's a Cowboy fan, but it's equal Cowboys this week, RJ. So I figured we got to talk a little bit back and forth here about what is maybe the biggest matchup of the NFL season so far.
Thomas, I am a big Dallas Cowboys fan. I'm a bigger Thomas Mott fan. The person, the applesauce that you and your family founded, obviously.
Right.
And so it's great to be with you. Health, wealth, and happiness to you and yours, but nothing but sports misery this week, certainly.
I appreciate that. Quickly, before we get into the actual meat potatoes here, RJ and I actually go back a while. I was kind of a guest host on his show back in San Antonio a long, long time ago. I say guest host because he very much ran that show. So we have some good blood between us, but like you said, bad blood for this one coming up 5-1 or 5-0 versus 4-1. Let's just start with some news here because it's, filming this on a Wednesday. The reporters that Dak Prescott was throwing on the side of practice today. Still unclear if he's going to go on Sunday. What's the latest you've heard?
Yeah, Mike McCarthy has been pretty straightforward about this for the last few weeks. We're starting now to get to that midway point of the initial time frame, that 4 to 6 weeks that was reported when Dak first fractured his thumb. So it is 5 weeks at this point from surgery. So you do kind of wonder, or it will be 5 weeks rather, if he's ready to go. Right, like that's the big question. But McCarthy has been strong in that whenever Dak plays, whenever he ultimately comes back, he's going to need a full week of practice. Then McCarthy's going to want to see that. And so the fact that Wednesday's practice at the time of this recording, as you mentioned, is kind of come and gone without him being a full participant. We'll see the exact designation they give him. It does lend to the idea that he won't play. Now, I will say on the other side of that, that Cooper Rush's first start, which actually came a year ago in Minnesota, the Cowboys played that really close to the vest. Nobody had any clue until that Sunday morning. That was also a night game. That Cooper Rush would ultimately wind up starting. And he did, and he won that game like he basically does all the time now. And so, McCarthy is somebody who believes in this kind of gamesmanship. I don't know if you recall his first season as the Cowboys head coach, obviously the COVID year. They had a televised or streamed practice. He stripped all of the names and numbers off of players' jerseys, just because he didn't want anybody to have any kind of intel. So and the last little like conspiracy theory nugget, we've seen Dak wear a thumb brace for a long time over the last few weeks, obviously in the aftermath of his surgery. On the flight to LA, the Cowboys social team tweeted out a photo. He was not wearing the brace then. He was, however, wearing it obviously throughout the game. So you do wonder, like, is there any kind of fronting going on here? Was that just a moment that Dak was letting his thumb air out? There's a lot of potential explanations, which is what makes the story a little bit of fun.
Would you want to throw Dak? Like, let's say Dak's 85% and the doctors say, yeah, you can go, but we'd rather you wait a week. It's up to you. Would you rather Dak play against Philadelphia on Sunday night? Or, Cooper Rush is 4-0. You want to just keep riding Cooper Rush?
The only part of me that doesn't want him to play if he's not at 100% is that we've seen Dak push himself before. The shoulder strain a year ago at training camp was kind of a product of that. Some people would argue that he pushed himself in the calf a year ago. The age-old cliche that you got to kind of protect these guys from themselves. And obviously that protects the best interest of the team as well. But, there are some people, some Cowboys fans who have pondered, who have speculated, well, just why do it this game? This game's too intense. Like, do you really want to bring him back and lose, on the road in Philly, blah, blah, blah. And I think if you're really, I'm not, but if you're really asking that question, then you need to move on from Dak. Like if you don't believe that he's capable of doing that, you're already out on him to some degree. So to me, it's simply a matter of, is he 100%? And I do think if the Cowboys were 2-3, I think that we'd be in a bit of a different situation here with his status for the game. I think he'd much more likely be playing. If not, he might be coming off of playing. But they bought themselves an enormous amount of time to kind of play with now because they've won these last 4 games.
Yeah, I think this whole national media storyline of, oh, well, if Cooper Rush keeps winning, can they even go back to Dak Prescott is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. The idea that you couldn't do what they've been doing, which is defensive run the football with Dak in there, who would be a better passer than Cooper Rush. You got to keep doing Cooper Rush. Just makes absolutely no sense. What is Cooper Rush? Who is Cooper Rush? I kind of dove into this on my earlier show this morning because you go through the numbers, just the straight numbers of Cooper Rush. And it's nothing special. It's a very mediocre, 200 to 235 yards a game, maybe 1 touchdown. Completion percentage is pretty much NFL average, 65 to 69%. What he doesn't do is turn the football over. Am I missing anything? Because to me, as an Eagle fan, and as somebody who keeps an eye on Dallas, but I'm not watching every single one of your games from start to finish, especially if the Eagles are on, I see a guy who doesn't turn the ball over, and they've had really good running game or a couple of really good running games and really good defense, and that's basically it. A long-winded way to say I'm not that scared of Cooper Rush.
I think that's pretty accurate, and that's the unfortunate part of the national story that you mentioned is there are a sector of Cowboys fans who, whatever, prisoners of the moment. You've got to stick with Cooper Rush, whatever, and you have to slight him to kind of disprove or prove how stupid that is.
Right.
And I hate doing that just because what he's doing is so incredible. The Cowboys have won 4 games in a row. You mentioned the run game. The defense is sort of self-explanatory, but against the Bengals, Tony Pollard had a 46-yard reception that Cooper Rush pitched out like 3 yards. And so, okay, that takes them down to the 1 yard line. Against the New York Giants, Jason Peters in his first play springs Tony Pollard loose for like a 40-yard touchdown. Okay, that's a big score in that game. This past week against the Rams, Tony Pollard had a 57-yard touchdown, which was Dallas's only offensive score. So, I don't even want to say it's the running game as a whole. I mean, yes, it has been methodical. Yes, they have had success. But you could argue that without those 3 plays, I mean, it's not hard to butterfly affect them into a very different life at this point in time. And so, whether you believe Tony Pollard or Zeke, that's a whole different debate in and of itself. But yeah, I mean, and I will say that's not to say Cooper is not talented. This past game, you mentioned the Eagles were on at the same time. CeeDee Lamb had a big time drop on, that was critical. Michael Gallup had a big time drop on 3rd down. So, it's not like Cooper is only benefiting from everything else around him. I do think that he has done enough to kind of drive the bus, so to speak. But that's the thing. He's driving a bus. That's the only vehicle he can drive. This is an F1 race. You know what I mean? Like a bus isn't going to cut it. And so it's unfortunate, and this formula really isn't sustainable. I mean, it is impressive what Dallas has done, and on paper, yeah, they beat the 2 Super Bowl teams and division rivals, but this is a bit of a down year in the NFL, right? Like, who are we both afraid of? Buffalo, Kansas City,
Yeah.
maybe Baltimore, the Eagles. Obviously, if you're not them, I mean, that's kind of it though. Outside of that, it's just like everybody else is sort of floating in the abyss. And so I think Dallas has benefited from that. They're fortunate that they haven't played the AFC South yet, like the other NFC East teams. But yeah, I mean, this idea that he can do things that Dak cannot is really silly. However, I do think that this has helped the Cowboys kind of save themselves from themselves, in that you don't need to play hero ball every game. You don't have to put the ball entirely in Dak's hands. You don't have to put everything on his shoulders. You can rely on your run game. You don't have to be super aggressive. You don't have to force everything. There is room for those things, obviously. But so I think they kind of needed to get back down to basics to remember how to do this. And Cooper Rush, in a weird way, allowed for that to happen.
Yeah, even as an Eagle fan watching from afar, as a team that has had a lot of success with backup quarterbacks, you can at least, I for one, I don't know how Eagle fans feel watching this show. I for one at least can respect the fact and appreciate a backup quarterback holding down the fort. It's just funny going back to my show this morning when I talked about Rush versus Dak, the comment section, it's not 50-50. It's like 75, percent of people saying, we don't want to play Cooper Rush because he keeps on winning. And I'm like, man, it's a take. Again, respect what he's done, but you laid it out well there that Dallas could very easily be in a different spot than 4-1. But again, you're 4-1, so what are you going to do? How do you guys view Philadelphia? Because I'm always fascinated, and I always ask this on whenever I interview people, previous shows or this one. I'm curious how the other team views my team, right? How do you guys view Philadelphia? Because the national media, to me, they started out the year saying the Eagles are, improved roster wise, but what's Jalen Hurts? We don't know, so we can't give you any sort of credit. Hurts is playing very, very well. And then it's like, oh, well, obviously, Jalen Hurts is at the Eagles and, Super Bowl contention. And then this past week, it's a shootout against the Cardinals. And then you suddenly get, well, oh, I don't know. Tough game there in the fourth quarter. The defense have a couple of drives to Kyler Murray. I don't know if we can put them as a Super Bowl contender. Are the Eagles, in your mind, as a Cowboy beat writer, as someone who covers Dallas, and again, the NFC East, whatever, do you view Philadelphia as a legit team in the National Football League?
I don't know how you can't. I mean, I think maybe before this week they were certainly the best team in the NFL, and you could argue that just a weaker performance against Arizona, Buffalo looked incredible,
Yeah.
Kansas City looked incredible. I mean, it is sort of a week to week thing, but they're in that mix, they're in that group. I certainly have doubted Jalen Hurts, like a lot of people, and I think, and this, like now people act like any doubt ever in him was silly or misplaced. No, like
Right.
he was not a functional passer for a long time, and so all credit to him for overcoming and improving. I'm a big fan of Howie Roseman. I really applaud the way he builds his team. And I love that he went for it. You could argue the only team in the NFC that went for it this year. Every other team kind of got weaker purposefully, the Cowboys included. And so I don't know that I would argue they're all in. I mean, they might have a top 3 pick next year in the Saints' pick, depending on how the things work out there. But it is amazing that, they already have somebody else's first round pick on top of all of this. So I think Jalen Hurts is in MVP consideration. I think the AJ Brown trade, I was not a fan of that early on, just from a value standpoint, but that has aged very well. Devontae Smith looks very good. Dallas Goedert, the run game. I don't think the defense gets enough attention just because the Cowboys defense is kind of the face of the NFL right now, and
Right.
therefore the NFC East. It's a very, very well-rounded team. The only thing I would argue with myself is, I mean, and this is just kind of like, football watching. I mean, you've been watching football your whole life. Have they peaked too early? Like, have we already seen the best version of this team?
Yeah.
And that's a silly thing, but it's football. It's fair, right? Like, and you look at this is probably the weakest I've thought the Eagles are coming off this win against the Cardinals. Now they won, and they're still a very, very good team. But I'm really high on the Vikings as a different example. And so that was a tough Monday night for me when Philadelphia had their way with them. That night, I thought, how does anybody stop this Eagles team? But obviously, it's a month later, and they certainly look like they have some holes. Injuries are catching up to them and coming for them the way that they've come for other teams to this point in the season. And so, I mean, I think they're firmly in the mix. I think they're the best team in the NFC at the very least. And I think there's a little bit of a gap between them and anybody else. But if they do lose to a Cooper Rush-led Cowboys team, I don't know what's worse. I guess I'll ask you, what would ensue more chaos? Losing to Cooper Rush or Dak coming back and dominating or whatever? Like, because
Cooper
you could.
Rush. It's got to
Do
be
you think
Cooper
so?
Rush. Yeah,
I
because
don't
at
know,
least
but Dak would be this like big brother because like the Eagles can't get over that hump. I
that's
feel
true
like.
too. That is true too. I mentioned that on the show this morning. There is that idea, you have to check all these boxes with Hurts if you're the national media before you finally give him his credit. And it was like going into the season, can he win from the pocket? Can he throw left? Because there was a whole chart of him not being able to throw
Right.
left. Can he beat winning football teams? And then can he beat Dallas? And Dak and the Cowboys have owned us since 2017. I'm trying to you count on 2 fingers how many times, if that, the Eagles have even been close to beating the Dallas Cowboys, and it's super frustrating as an Eagle fan. So I mean, there's this and that, but I would think that a lot of Eagle fans would look at Cooper Rush and go, if we can't score, more than this guy, if our offense can't score more than this guy, what are we doing right now? And that leads me into the idea and the topic of the Dallas defense, because the Dallas defense, I'm curious how you view them. Is this a defense that you can actually attack? Like, how would you do it if you were Philadelphia? Because I'm trying to think. Obviously, you got to protect Jalen Hurts because that's the bread and butter right now. Micah Parsons and this defensive line are insane. You talk about not being sold on Jalen Hurts for a little bit. That was me and the Micah Parsons draft pick. I said, okay, middle linebacker, whatever. And then they were going to convert him. And it's like, who does that in the NFL? And now he's like the best pass rusher in the league. It's ridiculous. So you stop him. If you're able to do that, are there opportunities on the backside here? Are those 4 straight wins of Cooper Rush simply due to the fact that the Rams offensive line is bad and the Bengals offensive line is bad? Carson Wentz exists. Like, is it stop the pass rush and then get some plays down the football field?
I think the issue has been exacerbated by the quality of their opponents, certainly. And the Cincinnati thing is questionable. Obviously, everyone knows they kind of remade their offensive line. They caught them in week 2. It was a little bit before we really doubted them.
Yeah.
It's not just they're among the highest pressure generators in the NFL, just sending 4. It's not like they're blitzing. I mean, it's just they're that good. And I think that's where they're a little bit different than previous, trustworthy Cowboys defenses. I think that the most solid version in the last decade is any group that Sean Lee kind of oversaw. But it was a situation where, obviously Sean Lee, an incredibly fragile player, when he was out, it was like, okay, that's it. Like they're done. They can't hang without him. And not that Micah doesn't significantly elevate everybody, but DeMarcus Lawrence is playing at an incredible level. Dorrance Armstrong's playing at an incredible level. Cowboys are getting contributions out of this year's second round draft pick. Sam Williams, Dante Fowler, free agent journeyman who they signed that Dan Quinn has a history with. They do blitz their safeties a lot. Donovan Wilson, Jaron Kearse. I mean, they do love to send these guys in their particular moments that they like to pick and choose. And so I think to mitigate them, you have to have an incredible offensive line. So Philly kind of has that, obviously. And you have to have receivers who can be better athletes and gain separation. We saw Cooper Kupp had the big 75-yard touchdown last week against Trayvon Diggs. I think it takes moments like that. And Devontae Smith's obviously a really talented route runner. AJ Brown is a physical monster. I don't know if anybody's ever compared him to Terrell Owens, but definitely, I'll sign up and be the next person in line
There
to
you
do
go.
it. I mean, that like I'd say the Eagles maybe on paper have what it takes. It is like unstoppable force meets a movable object type thing. I don't know that I've ever been this excited to watch the Cowboys defense go against the Eagles offense. It's always kind of been the opposite.
Yeah.
Like I've always trusted Philly to kind of have that defense that stifles things and makes things difficult, and waited for Dak or even Romo to kind of have their way with it. But it really comes down to Micah at the end of it. Like I know that's low hanging fruit, and I know it's not super in depth analysis, but I've never seen anybody like him. I mean, I've never seen anybody have the same sort of transformative effect that he does on this defense, or this team rather, that he does. You watch more college football than anybody I know. I mean, I would have never thought that this would have worked. The conversion, like you said.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he was great at Penn State, but what he is, and that's the thing. Like, you know, Mike is also somebody who like feeds off the moment. So like in Philadelphia, I don't know the mileage to Harrisburg or anything like that, but this is his moment. Like he's the dude who's like
Yeah.
built for these moments, and that's a really exciting thing.
Well, and I thought that Philadelphia, speaking of Parsons, I thought Philadelphia was going to take him at 10 whenever they drafted Devontae Smith. I thought for sure in that draft, as we were getting to 6, 7, 8, 9, Parsons at middle linebacker was going to be the final piece to an Eagle defense that never has had a great middle linebacker since Jeremiah Trotter back in the 04 Super Bowl team. And then of course he goes to Dallas. But as you said, it was not like he was a really good pass rusher at Penn State. He went bad. Not like he was coming out as the best pass rusher in that draft and then just got even better, when he became
Mhm.
Dallas Cowboy. It was like, hey, can you play pass rusher? Sure. And now he again is one of the best pass rushers in the entire NFL. It's insane. Um, who scares you the most? Give me an Eagle player out of all of them, and you named a bunch. AJ Brown. I like the comparison to To. Obviously, Devontae Smith. The offensive line. Is there a certain player that you think really could put some fear into the Cowboys defense or offense?
I would normally say Darius Slay, but I don't. I mean, right now my assumption, and again it's Wednesday, but my assumption is that Cooper Rush is going to play, and I just don't think that Cooper is going to challenge Slay enough to where that fear can kind of manifest itself. Um, I think Jason Kelsey, because I like he's built for the moment the same way Micah Parsons is. Like if in my head, Jason Kelsey is all week long like rallying the troops and getting everybody like he's the one who knows what this is. And he's the one who, that's where the battle is won for the Cowboys, right? In the trenches. If that defensive line can generate pressure, if they can get to Jalen Hurts, I really like their odds, obviously. And Jason Kelsey has a lot to do with that, not just from a leadership standpoint, but from a literal and physical one. And so if he can help hold down the fort, then I think that might be enough. But I don't know that it is enough. I mean, you can make an argument that Philly has the best offensive line in the NFL, and that this is the best pass rush in the NFL. And so you mentioned since 2017, there have not been a lot of Cowboys games in Philadelphia specifically that have had a lot of juice or have really had any
That's true.
juice.
Yeah.
Because they were the end of seasons. We've had three regular season finales. There was the Ben DiNucci game. I mean, this is I would say maybe since 2014, since the Dez Bryant Nolan Carroll game, which was also Sunday night. I mean, this is epic, and so like I'd say the person who scares me the most is the person who tends to rise to the occasion, and that's typically Jason Kelsey, even though it's less obvious than your kind of skill position players.
It is fun that it is such a meaningful game. And there have been a couple of games, more specifically, like you said, in Dallas that have come in the middle of the season. But the Eagles and Cowboys both would have weird losses on their schedule. Where it's like, okay, are they actually that good? Are these really division winning playoff teams? I'm trying to think who needs it more. I thought about this all morning today. Where does the drama come for a team that loses? If Philadelphia loses, you do make the case that yes, Dallas is the big brother. You can't get past Dallas. Jalen Hurts can't win the big game against a divisional opponent. They're still 5-1, right? They still are right there at the top of the NFC East with a much easier schedule the rest of the way. Dallas loses. And there is that idea of like, okay, the magic run of 4-0 with Cooper Rush is done. But if Dak doesn't play, then Dak comes back. It almost feels like the drama that would normally be there if your team were to lose this game come Monday on ESPN or on Fox Sports or whatever, you can make the argument it's not that big because both teams are going to have less than, two losses, one loss. One team gets their quarterback back. The other team has a very easy schedule. I don't know who needs to win this game more.
I love to stir the pot, and I think the answer is probably the Eagles. Because Dallas is clearly playing with house money, right? Like and
True.
especially
Yeah.
if Cooper Rush is starting this game, like it is so clearly, and not just like relative to the last month, but like nobody thought that this year was going to be anything, right? That their offseason was terrible. They traded away Amari Cooper. They cut Lyle Collins. They looked like they had no idea what they were doing. Sean Payton, Dan Quinn, Mike McCarthy, like it was chaos and turmoil, nothing going right. However, the Eagles from the jump, right? Like trade this, trade that, acquire AJ Brown, get the new contract done, right? Like get all these bells and whistles. commit to Jalen Hurts, be somewhat interested in Deshaun Watson, not know what direction things are going to ultimately head, ultimately decide to go forward with Jalen Hurts, the like rallying around it. Plus, I mean, neither of these two head coaches, only one of them has worn a item to say beat the other, and that is Nick Sirianni. Like, I think the Eagles have generally made it a bigger matchup, and now they're the favorite. Now, like, I do think, and you know this better than I do, a lot of things I had seen prior to the season starting from just Eagles fans were, things like I'm not comfortable with all this preseason hype. I don't like this. Everybody
Yeah.
stop hyping up the Eagles. And so, in a weird way, I think Eagles fans are sort of like waiting for the shoe to drop. And the moment it does is the like confirmation that like, oh no, this really was a mirage. It really was a facade. And I think to lose to a Cowboys team on primetime, the whole world watching, for it to be Philly's first loss, I think it would be a, maybe needs it more is the wrong way to put it. I think it would be a more bitter pill for Eagles fans if they lost than Dallas. Because I think Dallas would say, you know what, hey, like this ride had to end at a certain point,
Right.
and what big shock had happened against the last undefeated team in the NFL.
It is a fair point. There are plenty of Eagle fans, and a lot of people comment on the show, and I kind of read through them and see where people are at. There are a lot of people who they're not surprised, but each week when as I get to like a show where I talk about the opponent, it's like, oh, listen, the Minnesota Vikings. Woo. How you stop Justin Jefferson. And then it's, oh,
Right.
Carson Wentz revenge game that's coming. And then it's Kyler Murray. They're a sneaky good football team. The Eagles, like, and so each week it's fun to kind of watch Eagle fans as I try to assure them because I bought all in on the Jalen Hurts Nick Sirianni train. I mean, I'm riding it until it either wins a Super Bowl or falls off the rail. But I do think you're right that a lot of Eagle fans are kind of holding their breath and they are worried about Dallas. And I'm worried about Dallas. I think Dallas can easily cause some issues for Philadelphia. Let's go to the NFC East here quickly. I don't buy the Giants. Now, you have to kind of preface that because I do buy the Giants long term. Like if you're buying the Giants low right now, $6, a share. Next year, whether it's Daniel Jones or not, they're going to be even better. I think Brian Dable was the best hire this offseason. I hated the fact he came to our division. But 4-1, albeit a surprise, I just don't see that being sustainable. And even if they get to 9 wins, even if they are a wild card team, eventually there's going to be a football team out there that's going to be able to stop Saquon Barkley, and you're going to make Daniel Jones beat you. And if you can score more than 24, he's not able to do it. I just don't buy the Giants. I don't think you do either.
No, I mean this Cowboys team beat them, right? Like, and it felt that way at the very, leading up to that week. And obviously they weren't 4-1 at the time, but they were 2-0.
Yeah.
And they're. I don't think it's fair to like try to buy in. They're in such a different place, right? Like they're a more successful version of last year's Lions, right? Like be cute, be fun, play spoiler. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like start the rebuild, get the momentum going. And I think, it's not just like the wins, it's going for it in the first game of the season. It's changing the culture, make like having functional adults in the building. I'm with you. It sucks. And they're no longer. I mean, the Eagles didn't even sweep them last year. I mean, imagine losing to Joe Judge in a year that you're a playoff team, but whatever. But like they're no longer this like afterthought, which is a bummer. I will say the last bit of chaos I'm rooting for them is okay. Be interested in Daniel Jones. Let Saquon Barkley go off. Pay him in the offseason. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? By
Yeah.
all means, like because they're Andy Dufresne with the like end of the tunnel in sight. And they're like thinking about looking back and heading back into the prison with the warden and everybody. I mean, Saquon's been awesome, and I think proven a lot of doubters, myself included, wrong. But that's just such a precarious bet to make. You have to continue, I think, to operate this objectively. And they're at least, like ultimately, it's the Giants are fun, and I think that their fans are probably grateful for that because they're all Yankee fans too.
Right.
So it's a fun time of year for them. But yeah, I mean the few they've turned the ship around. They're maybe not 180 degrees back, but they are certainly in the process of getting around.
Yeah, I don't. They will not win a playoff game. I'm still going to say they won't make the postseason, but you can see the scenario if Daniel Jones is the guy, just like how if Jalen Hurts is the guy, you get him a weapon on the outside because they're completely devoid of them. You could really see that football team being annoying, like seriously annoying for the next couple of years. A team that's not annoying at all right now, but it's fun to watch the dumpster fire is the Washington Commanders. And I know you saw Ron Rivera just shred Carson Wentz in front of the media. Surely you've seen the video where they ask him what's the difference between the Commanders who are 1-4, the Eagles, the Giants, and the Cowboys who are 4+ wins, and he says quarterback. And at first I thought it was like Twitter magic where they kind of change his words around. We didn't really mean that, and I'll see the full video of him going like quarterback, but we love Carson Wentz. No, it was quarterback. Like they have legit quarterbacks. They believe in Dak. They believe in Jalen Hurts. They're starting to kind of buy into the idea of Daniel Jones. It's clear that Wentz is not the long-term future there, But when we talk about other teams in our division, I don't see a path for the Commanders to eventually be good next season. I think Washington, they still have the Dan Snyder looming. Whatever goes down with him in terms of selling the team. They don't have a quarterback, so you have to draft one. They don't really have a running game. Their offensive line is not anything special. They have Chase Young, but that's basically it. They feel like basement dwellers for a very, very long time. And the fact you're throwing Carson Wentz under the bus 5 weeks in is crazy. But as an Eagle fan, it's not that crazy because we watched all the same stuff he's doing right now.
Yeah, I don't know that Carson even makes it to the game in Philadelphia
He
at
might
this
not.
rate because they do have the qualifier as far as play time. And if you're the Commanders, like, why are you going to play him? Like, why are you going to forfeit a higher draft pick? But I'm with you. I have never Ron Rivera, the person, tremendous human being, big fan of Ron Rivera, the person.
Yes.
I would love to hang out with him, go to brunch, like anything like that. But Ron Rivera, the football coach, all the way out on. I thought it was so dumb 2 years ago when people fell over themselves because Washington won the division at 7-9 in a year that Dak Prescott missed 11 games,
Yeah.
and where the seventh win came from Doug Peterson lying down. You know what I mean? Like, but people thought like, oh, watch out, here they come, and like, what have they? They've done nothing well functionally. Like, he's not a great coach, and to throw, I mean, there's something about Carson that like incites, rude behavior from the people in leadership around him. And I'm not saying he's void of responsibility
Right.
in any of this.
Right.
But I mean, the way the Colts handled him was really awful at the
Hmm.
very end. They threw him under the bus several times. And Ron's supposed to be this defensive minded coach. The Washington defense is so terrible. Yeah, I mean, the trade was always going to end this way. I mean, the fact that it got this way before Halloween is funny. But there's nothing to feel good about or excited about. I would feel so stupid saying "Go Commanders." Like, it would just
I
make
would
me
too.
feel dumb and silly. And so I don't believe in changing teams or allegiances, but I would make an exception for any Commanders fan who wanted to bail at this point.
There is something about Carson Wentz, and I was, regrettably all in on him. I mean, 2017 was nuts, but you go back to 2017, you do see a lot of plays where it's like, that's not sustainable. That was a pretty lucky, you think back to that was this Monday night against the Washington Redskins back then when he kind of ducked under people and made throws, and you're like, is that going to be that, the next 10 years? And then it wasn't. But yeah, what happened with the Indianapolis Colts, and now it's happening with Commanders, the idea that he's somehow not a good teammate just keeps coming into my mind. And he seems like such a nice guy. And like my mom and I both watched Hard Knocks last year with the Colts, and he seems on paper like this is a stand up guy. Maybe he is. But from a football perspective, you can't have back to back organizations just throw you to the wolves, for not making plays, essentially. Like, there's got to be more behind it. It's gonna be fascinating to see how quickly they get off him because, like you said, Heineke's sitting there, and they've at least won games with Taylor Heineke, and he's going to throw interceptions at the goal line every week. No, that's what Carson Wentz is going to do. Okay, we'll wrap up. Coming back to the Eagles and the Cowboys here. Parsons has a groin injury, on track to play. There's no concern there.
No, I mean,
Okay.
if anyone deserves the benefit of the doubt, it's him. And for what it's worth, he suffered it in the first quarter of the game. He had 2 sacks in the second half, including the game winner, the kind of ice things against Matthew Stafford.
Okay. How would you attack the Eagle defense if you were Kellen Moore?
I mean, if I've got Cooper Rush, I mean, they are playing some incredibly vanilla football, and I think I would just try to run the ball. It sounds so simplistic and lame and 101, but that's where they're at right now. I mean, it truly is. It is some straight up old school I formation halfback dive stuff, and that's what you got to do. And you got to hope that Tony Pollard breaks one or you pick up a big play. CeeDee Lamb would have had a big touchdown on Monday Night Football a few weeks ago. And that's like Cooper's made some nice throws and had some drops, things like that. So you need the big play. I think you have to have some sort of big play moment to give your defense that room to breathe. But you're going to need a defensive score, I think, if Cooper Rush is playing.
Last one here. It's always funny. Doing a lot of interviews on local sports radio, as you've done as well. A lot of people are very weird about giving score predictions. It's like a certain time of the week they have to wait to give their score prediction. And I don't know why. It's like no, I must wait until I know all the details. And it's like, how many details do you need? Can you give a score prediction, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I
Yeah,
mean, like, it's a silly thing, but I mean, I didn't come this whole way, to not pick the Cowboys,
of
right?
course.
Like, I'm totally fine admitting that, but I think their path to victory, assuming it's Cooper Rush, is 22-16, 22-19. I think it's
Yeah.
some, like maybe like 3 or 4 field goals from the Eagles, like different drives just kind of stalling, and that just not being enough, and Dallas having they did get, a defensive score at the very beginning of last week. And so I think it's a tight, close game. Obviously right now, I think, at least according to DraftKings, Dallas is 6-point underdogs. I would take that all day.
I would too.
If Dak plays, I mean, the theater of it all lends me to say I'd like that they just crush the Eagles. Like that would be the most like Dak return possible, right? Like he comes back and they just win like 31-14.
Oh
And it's
gosh.
never close. It's never in
Right.
doubt.
There you go. All right. Well, I appreciate the score prediction because a lot of people don't do that. And I appreciate you jumping on here. I'm trying to do some more interviews here on the Thomas Mott Show. I like talking to the enemy, as we always say, looking at the other team's perspective. So find you at RJ Ochoa, although I don't know a lot of my followers will follow you on Twitter, but they can to get the Dallas, the latest updates. Maybe we'll talk the week before Christmas, right? Christmas Eve is in Dallas. And I think both teams are still going to be pretty relevant by then. And so hopefully we'll talk then.
That's right. Thanks for having me, Thomas. Always appreciate it. Always going to be a big fan of your work. My thoughts and prayers for you and Matt Rule right now. I know it's a tough week
Yeah,
for you.
that's a whole different conversation. Yeah, that's a whole different conversation. RJ Ochoa, bloggingtheboys.com. I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me, Thomas. Let me know when it's out. We'll get it out on our end too.
Right on.
All right, man. Have a good one.